Thank you very much. Yes, I'm very happy to see all of you here today. I'm sure there's still some more coming in, but for those of you who are early, thank you very much. For those of you who are here, welcome. Okay, today, I guess you all know why we're here today, right? This is the important discussion to actually update you about the revised syllabus for 2015. I'm sure some of you, just a show of hands, how many of you attended the earlier one that we had earlier this year? We had a workshop, I would say an exam technique workshop, and also updates on revised syllabus early this year, February. Any of you here? Oh, okay. So y'all know who Mr. Peter Stewart is. Okay. All right. So we have Peter here today. As you can see on the board here, he's the Director of Learning from CIMA, and he will be sharing with you, okay, for those of you who were here before, he'll be giving you updates about the revised syllabus, the assessment, which is something that we are all looking forward for. And for all of you who are first time here today, Peter will also be giving a brief recap, right, Peter? Is that
ever so brief?
Everything. So it's like if you don't know, if you have no idea, Peter will answer all your questions today about the revised syllabus. Okay, so I'm not going to talk much because today I will leave it to Peter to guide you through. But if you have any questions, please do ask Peter, and I'm sure this is a very good opportunity because he's here very rare, right, Peter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Peter, over to you.
It doesn't seem that long ago. Remember, we were just along the corridor in the lecture theatre with my colleague Clancy and Stephen, who was telling you how you would write business English in the exams. I remember that was a very inspiring session that we had on that one, and I want to hear it again. Now, the aim here is really to move us on. So whether or not you were with us in February, I'm making this bit of an assumption that you are aware that CIMA's syllabus is changing, right? I think we've been quite noisy about it over the last 6 months. So I'd be surprised if you hadn't heard that. And if you had got some awareness of what's happening with the syllabus as we change it over at the end of this year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through the rationale behind the syllabus. Did that in February, talked about how we've spoken to employers, or listened to employers more like, and used their wish list really to define what we do with the syllabus. We'll go through just a sort of very, very brief recap of what's happening within the syllabus and how it's going to be assessed. And I really wanted to use the time today to update you on developments that we've had since February. Not developments doesn't mean that we've changed direction. It just means that we have got further towards running the exams that are going to be starting on the 2nd of January 2015. And there are things in there that I can show you which we didn't have in the form they're in now 6 months ago. So I want to get you thinking about what happens with the exams, think about how you should be practicing, how you should be learning for the exams. And we've got 2 sessions. There's going to be a break at some point where we get a chance to for quick refreshments. And that means it's kind of sensible for me to look in the first session at one type of exam, and in the second session at the other type of exam. But before doing that, what I want to do is really just remind you of the reason for having 2 types of exam within our new syllabus, or within our new assessment methodology. It's something that is unique. Yeah, there's no other professional accounting body that has done what we are doing, and there's no other professional accounting body with the way that its current syllabus is set up that allows it to do what we're doing. Because the big story that we did, right, you may remember, that's the syllabus structure. It looks very much like what we've got in the 2010 syllabus. There's 3 pillars: the E pillar, the P pillar, the F pillar, enterprise, performance and financial. There's 3 levels: operational, management and strategic. Even the codes for the subjects haven't changed: E1, E2, E3, etc. Right, so kind of cosmetically, the syllabus, where all the learning outcomes are, the subjects that you have to sort of read your books for and listen to lectures about and go and research, those subjects sit within the same 3x3 structure that we've got just now. Right? So it doesn't look remarkably different to what it is if we just talk about this syllabus content. This diagram, though, also refers to the assessment. And the assessment has got 1, 2, 3 exams per level plus a 4th. Right? And that's where things have gone different to how it is in the 2010 syllabus. And the reason for that is that each level represents a level of seniority within an organization. It represents employability and your readiness for work at those different levels of seniority. So if you think about it, what an accountancy qualification, CIMA or any other does just now, is it gets you working, examining, all the way through 3 years, 4 years, and then you finish. Yeah? And in some of the qualifications, you've got things that get harder as you go on. So you'd have an introductory financial accounting paper where you get used to the debits and the credits and preparation of financial accounting statements. And that would be for a small business. Then you move on and you do it for groups of companies, and so you've got more advanced of that. And then you go up to the international and whatever, and advanced taxation and advanced auditing or whatever the syllabuses might have. So generally, the concept is, before we look at our own new syllabus, it's about things getting harder as you spend longer in the syllabus, more complicated, more complex. But that's not what we're doing here. What goes on in our strategic level isn't necessarily any harder than what goes on in the operational level. Right? We're not thinking and talking about the difficulty of the exams or the difficulty of the subjects now. We're talking about the seniority of the individual who's doing the tasks that we're looking at. And when you're setting out in life at the operational level and you're at that newcomer status within an organization, everything's new, everything's hard, unfamiliar and complex. Then you get a promotion and you're asked to do different things. So again, everything's new, everything's unfamiliar, yeah? And so on. Your next promotion to the strategic level, again, there's new things, there's unfamiliar things, so we're not talking about things getting harder. All right? Depending on your background, depending on what degree you've done before coming into the qualification, depending on any work that you've done, some people will find strategic level actually more straightforward than some of the tasks of operational. All right? So now that's one thing that we've got going for the syllabus. And I'll refer to a couple of illustrations to go through in particular. But each level represents a job role. It represents a position within an organization and a clear level of seniority. Right? And the reason for introducing these case studies is to say, well, why wait until the very end of your qualification, your 3 or 4 years of study? Why wait until the very end to see if you're any good at communicating your understanding in a business context. It doesn't make sense. We want to be able to say, somebody has a diploma in management accounting. We've called that, within our syllabus definitions, we've called that somebody who could be employed as a finance officer, right? And not only do they know stuff within the 3 boxes, but they're able to apply it. They're able to look at a business context and think about the issues that somebody at that level should be thinking about. And they integrate thinking about some short-term decision making and the impact it has on the organisation, or the impact it has in the finances. These things shouldn't stand alone as separate disciplines that you only think about when you go to start work. You've got to be ready for work before you go, right? And this is where the huge difference lies now between CIMA and every other professional accounting syllabus, qualification syllabus. Because anywhere else you look, there will be levels within the exams, all right? And groupings of subjects. And when you think about it, all they're doing is providing a little signpost about what subjects you can do, right? The one I can name off by heart, the Certified Accountants, ACCA, they've got level, I can't remember, foundation level, I think, with a little group of F1, F2, F3. Then they've got their kind of intermediate level, the sort of thing that sits somewhere around here. And they've got law, management accounting, trying to get it in the right order, taxation, 7 is financial accounting, auditing, financial management. Okay? Now, there's links between some of the things that go on in it. Financial accounting and auditing makes some sense. Taxation, financial accounting, but taxation and management accounting are to the degree that they do it. Company law and management accounting, absolutely no contact between them. All right? So a qualification like that, they can't say, when somebody has done this, this, and this, they are employable as that type of a person. If you've done company law and management accounting, there's not really a career path that you can walk into. And this is the whole idea. We talk about employability and making people more employable. This is what we've done. This is the rationale behind what we've done. All right? So when you're studying at a level, what you've got to do is to get yourself into almost a role play from the very beginning of when you study. Now, I'm using the management level just as an illustration. It's not in the handout thing that you've got there. What you've got in the handout, there's a picture of the syllabus somewhere. And the other thing you've got is this competency framework, right, which is, pages not numbered, just before the middle. Okay? And this is the framework within which we've devised our syllabus, the requirements for practical experience you have to complete before membership, and the professional development framework. All come within this, saying that a management accountant in any employing organisation needs to have a balance of technical skills, business skills, people skills, and leadership skills. Right? And these different personas that we've created at operational level, the officer, at management level, the manager, strategic level, the senior manager, they expect a different balance of those skills. So at the operational level, it's much more reliant on the core accounting, finance, technical skills. Because that person is not going to be involved in making the decisions, is providing information for the decision. They're not going to be hugely employed in leading the organisation. They're providing information to the leaders of organisations. So we don't expect them to dive in at the deep end. At the strategic level, this pie chart looks like the competency framework. It's 25% of each. It's a well-balanced set of skills that we've developed. Okay? So when you're studying at whichever level, we've got a different mix of the skills to focus on. And you need to be aware of that. You need to understand why that is and what would be expected of you in an organisation. So I'm following the theme through with the management level. And say there's similar things that we've got on our website for operational and for strategic. So, and apologies to those further back that might not be able to read this. This is, we created personas for each level. Just a very brief definition of who you've got to pretend to be when you're studying at this level, and particularly when we move on and we look at the integrated case study. So this talks more about the case study than it does about the 3 subjects. So you're a manager, you've got people working for you, you're making decisions, and you're speaking to the chief finance officer and senior business managers, product managers, chief operating officers, technology officers, and so on. And within the 3 subjects, you've got, this is just your general high-level consideration. Look, I'll start in the middle at P, because that's kind of where case studies will come up from. You'll have some decisions about the products that you want to be making and selling, the prices at which you're going to be selling. You're going to be looking at performance of different divisions within your organisation, trying to improve the performance where it's falling short of expectation. All right? So that's kind of your main role. Within that, you've got to think about the stakeholders in the organisation. Who owns the organisation? Who's lent to the organisation? What about the customers? What about the suppliers? What about the whole environment in which the organisation works? So you can't just make a decision based on some numbers. You have to think about the people with whom you're dealing. So people skills come into it, yeah? And the business environment in which you operate. So the business skills come into it, yeah? And when you're making these decisions and considering the stakeholders, particularly if the decision's to do with building something, buying something, investing in something, you've got to think about the people who are going to give you the money. Right? Am I going to have to approach a bank to borrow money? Am I going to go to the stock market and try and have an issue of shares to support this? Yeah? Will I just take credit from my suppliers for money? What's the impact on all those providers of finance going to be? So that's why I need to have a thorough understanding of what they'll see when they look at the organisation. Okay, so we link these together and say what's going on in your head when you have to advise on decisions being made. All right, so you think about that beyond just a box of subjects and a box of learning outcomes and techniques and calculations. All right, so we've got to think wider than just a subject. That's the whole idea of having everything now in levels. It's why, if I can just go back a couple of slides, it's why you are no longer permitted to take E1 and E2 at the same time. It's not because, this is not because E2 builds on E1, as in assumes knowledge of E1 and it gets harder. That doesn't happen. These subjects are independent of one another. The reason we don't want people taking them side by side is that it's inappropriate to do that. You know, you've got your place in the organisation. You need to, you know, and I put this phrase in as a simulation, you need to earn your promotion before you get to do this. And then your next promotion, right? So that's the sort of logic of the levels now that we've got in there. There's another thing, I won't read everything out this on here. There's another diagram which I think, you know, obviously a little bit more complex, but it just, for each of the levels I've got these things, saying, you know, here you are. This is your persona, this is who you are, you're the manager. These are the skills that you need to have, the same pie chart as before. And the reason that you need all those skills is what you're doing is your day job. You're producing performance information, cost reports, you're producing data that will help people above you make decisions, and you're going to, the phrase there says, you're going to present reality through numbers. Now, we had an employability forum yesterday where we were asking, you know, a CFO to say to students, fourth-year bachelor students, to say, look, what do you need from your accountants? And the answer was, I'll assume they've got the technical skills. If you get a degree in it, if you pass an exam in it, then it means you can do your debits and credits and get things in the right place. But the phrase you used was, I need them to tell stories. I need them to tell me understand what those numbers are, and tell me why they fit it together in the way they do. So that's what we're doing in there. And we need to influence, so we need to have the people skills and leadership skills, because we are dealing with people who have to do things for us and will make decisions on the back of what we're doing. Okay? So it's an important factor that you need to understand throughout your studies at a level, particularly so when you get onto a case study. But in order to understand why you're doing what you're doing for each of the three subjects, the three objective test exams, you've got to, it will help you to learn that. Now, this is something that we showed back in February. What are we going to do to get you through the exams? You're going to do the three subjects. It's not ideal, but it makes sense to concentrate on them kind of one at a time for the exams. You know, I wouldn't set 1 week where I'm doing all three exams. You can study for them together, but I would suggest some revision where you take a week or two to revise for one, then come back to the next one, a week or two to revise for that, and the next one a week or two to revise for that, at the very least. What I know we're going to be seeing with some of the training providers, definitely back in the UK and in Southern Africa, is they're going to just say, right, all you're going to study in March is P2. Then in April we'll do F2, and then in May we'll do E2. Yeah? So you'll just do complete studies one at a time. Okay? But before launching into those studies, we'll spend some time in more detail looking at the personas and what you'll end up doing within the role that we're doing here, so in the management role. Now, what the aim is in doing these three subjects is that we acquire skills. Yeah? We acquire competency in the tools that we need to have to do our job. And there's no harm in doing this one at a time. My big analogy for this type of examination, the whole level examination, comes down to food, as it must do. You know, you don't get this without thinking about food quite a lot. So the idea is, you know, I want to learn how to prepare a meal. I don't cook, let's say, I don't cook at all, don't know anything about cooking, but I know I'm going to have friends round, or there's going to be a party, or there's something, and I want to cook an impressive meal. Okay? Now, to keep things simple, there are three areas that I've got to focus on for the meal. Yeah? I'm going to have meat or fish. So I can go away and learn about cooking meat, preparing fish, cooking fish, all the various different styles and so on. All right? I also need to have vegetables or salads. So here's another course that I'll go on, one that is just about vegetables and salads. Right? And then the sweet, the dessert. Yeah? So those can be thought of as being different tools, different techniques that eventually will come together to make this magnificent meal that I'm thinking of. Okay? So that's what we're doing there. Here. When I'm learning about meat and fish, the teacher might say, oh, and of course, when you're having chicken, it actually goes very nicely with tarragon, and we'll worry about that when we're doing that part of the course. So there'll be a mention that when I'm learning about P2, it has an impact on the financial statements, this decision, or it needs to consider stakeholders, right? But let's just focus on the key thing with P2 to get through that exam. We understand where it fits in the bigger picture, but we're focusing in on that. Okay? And then once I've passed my test in meat and fish, I've passed my test in the vegetables and the salads, and I've passed my test in the desserts, then the next thing that comes along is somebody says, okay, we got people coming round for a dinner party. There's going to be 12 of them. I didn't know that when I started the course. I thought it might have been 6, it might have been 24, I don't know. Oh, and then within that group of 12, that guy there, he doesn't eat red meat, okay? And she has got an allergy to nuts. And yeah, so you get 1 or 2 problems that are thrown in. So I think, well, if it's not red meat, then it has to be fish or chicken. And if it's chicken, then what vegetables go with the chicken? And do I prepare a nice set of vegetables with walnuts through them? No, I can't do that, so I must think of a different dish. And my dessert has to be, so if I've got a light, can I have a heavy dessert? Or whatever you do to put the meat together, you integrate the separate pieces of knowledge that you've developed, and you put them together at the end. All right? And is this, yeah, I know it sounds delicious already. And so that's what you can say now about the CIMA qualification from 2015. It's a delicious meal with a huge party at the end, where everyone has a lovely, lovely, tasty meal. All right? Something like that. Okay, but that's kind of it. You've got separate tools that you can isolate and learn in isolation. Yeah? Those are our objective tests. At some point, you've got to put them together. And if you can see in the distance where they get put together, without over studying it, without saying, okay, while I'm busy slicing this lamb, what I'm going to do is get these vegetables. No, you've got to wait. You know that you'll use those vegetables, but you're not going to use them just yet, because we just want to concentrate on that one thing. Put them all together, and there's our feast. Okay, so that's the logic that we've got in there. Couple of bits that we mentioned before. I'm going to take a look at the objective testing in a moment. On demand means that really any day of the week, any week of the year, pretty much any time of any day, you should be able to find somewhere that you can do an exam. It's not quite as on demand as saying, oh look, we just finished, let's pop out to Pearson View and do an exam now. You do have to give them notice and book a slot. And I think we're generally working towards about 48 hours notice to do that. So that's really good, because that means, unlike the conventional paper-based exams, you don't have to be rushed and say, right, I'm doing this in May, it's on the third Wednesday in May, and I've got to be ready for the third Wednesday in May. Yeah, you might have a busy time when you're working. You might have, all sorts of things going on that would make it better to be the second week in June. You can do that here. Okay? You need to set yourself targets to get through these, because the case studies are stuck with certain time periods. Now, when we were looking at this in February, when we introduced it, we just had this general idea that we would have 4 examining windows in a year. The detail of those examining windows is that there will be 5 days in each of those 4 months on which you can do your case study. So in each of those months, apart from the very first window in 2015, in each of those months, on the second week, there will be operational case study exams. On the third week, there will be management, and on the fourth week, there will be strategic case study exams. Right? And on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 5 days within there. Tuesday to Saturday, we've chosen to go for. Pearson VUE test centres will be running the exams. Okay? And the mechanics of it, again, after the break, we'll go take a look at the case studies. But it's not as things are just now, where there's one exam. Yeah, because that would be a bit silly, wouldn't it? Because we'd have 1 or 2 people taking the exam on the Tuesday, coming out, telling all their friends what's in the exam, so everyone could work in it on the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'd have capacity issues on the Saturday as everyone went in to do that. Right? There's going to be 5 different exams. And what's not yet decided, but I think we're very nearly decided on it. We've wondered whether we'll have a Tuesday, then a Wednesday, then a Thursday, then a Friday, then a Saturday exam. So 5 different exams, 1 per day. We still think there's a bit of an issue there that you might get some taking it in the morning and telling all their friends, and they all take it in the afternoon. So what's much more likely to happen is that which exam you do is sort of a random selection on the day of the exam. So 5 of you might be in a room taking the same case study, or 5 of you might be doing, each of you doing a different case study, right? I'll look a little, ask me about that with more questions when we're looking at the case study itself, because there's 1 or 2 bits that I'll be showing that you can work with that. Now, objective testing. Have any of you had a chance to look at our practice exams that we published in July for the objective test to see what's going on? Has anyone heard about pass marks for the exams? What pass marks have you heard about? %, yeah. A bit quieter. I did this in Johannesburg about a month and a half ago, and I was nearly shouted out of the room. I said, does anyone know what the pass mark is? Just casually. And 160 students doing 70%! Right. Now, this is, what do you think of a 70% pass mark? Think it's high? Think it's harder than what you've got just now? Yeah? Right. Here's the bit that I really like doing. I'm going to show you that 70% and 50% are the same thing. Right? I make it sound like I'm doing a magic trick. I've got nothing up my sleeve here. Right? I'm a mathematician by degree. So I know that doesn't sound right, but I did in my degree, I did imaginary numbers and all sorts of stuff. So to me, that sort of claim is, yeah, let's see what you've got. I don't dismiss it straight away. But all right, let me just take it through. Let's start by saying, I want people to be competent to the tune of being able to do 70% of the stuff that they studied for. All right? Now, those that were along the corridor in February will remember the stories that we said, is 50% a good target? If you're looking at an airline pilot, remember that story? If you're getting on an aircraft and you meet the pilot and you say, oh brilliant, where are you taking me to? Oh, I'm going to fly you to London. Oh brilliant, when did you pass your exam? Passed it last week. Good. What did you score? 50%. Right? Now you start getting a little bit nervous. And then if you chat further and the pilot says, and I was really good at all the stuff about taking off and going in the right direction, but I could never get the bit about landing. You know, I was no good at landing, but I got 50%, is that okay? Doesn't sound good, does it? So we don't want to send people into employment saying they can do half their stuff. So 70% is a little bit better. It allows for obviously some errors that you make with exam nerves and exam pressures and so on. So that is better, clearly it's better than somebody who's 50% competent. So let's follow this through. We've set that as a target. We want them to be proficient. Now let's look at a paper-based exam. You may not be aware, you probably are aware though, if you've done a paper-based exam, has anyone ever revised for something that they think they're coming up, that is going to come up? You've asked your lecturer, yeah? What's going to happen in the exam? What tips do you have for next week's exam? You've asked that? Yeah? And the lecturer, what does the lecturer know? And don't forget, I worked for about 20 years as a lecturer. And I have all my notes and all my courses and tons of practice, and then at the end of the course somebody would say, what are your tips for the exam? And I would panic and make up 5 subjects, or however many there were going to be examined. So the lecturer doesn't know, but the lecturer's going to say some things. So you might say there's going to be, you know, correlation and regression, time series analysis and forecasting. Sounds good. So you spend a weekend studying that, but the lecturer knew nothing about the content of the exam. You get to the exam and that's not there. Have you been there? You've done that? Yeah, it's not good, is it? You spend the minutes going, and then you look around and somebody's 2 desks away from you and whatever they revised is in there, so they're going. Always a good exam hall technique. I used to do that all the time. Remember my final exam for taxation, we had a horror of a question that nobody had expected. In fact, we'd been told there was going to be 3 20-mark questions, and the first question was 30 marks, and this frightened people. And I could see them, and I was right in the middle at the front of the hall, and I could see them going. And I just put on my bravest, silliest smile. So they started looking for the question that I'd seen that was obviously so pleasant. Meanwhile, I went and answered the question. Anyway, so in an exam, sorry, a bit of diversion there. In an exam, we don't cover everything that's in the syllabus. So our correlation, regression, forecasting, time series analysis didn't come up because the examiner can only test a certain percentage of the exam. And 70% is actually quite unlikely. It's more likely to be lower than that. It would take a remarkably well thought out exam to reach 80%. Yeah? So there's lots of topics that get left out. So now, what's going to happen if somebody is 70% proficient on a bunch of topics that they've managed to study randomly, and the examiner independently has chosen 70% of the topics to test? What mark is going to come out? Those of you who've done expected values might be a step ahead on this one. 70% independent of another 70%, the expected value of your scores is 49%. We'll call it 50% pass mark there. So in a paper-based exam, if you get 50%, that, on average, reflects 70% proficiency. On average, right? But the worst bit about that, and those at the back can't see down this far, is that depends on luck, right? And this is something that I think is desperately unfair. If you have spent a weekend studying correlation, regression, time series analysis and forecasting, and it doesn't come up in the exam, the exam has not reflected your effort and your understanding and your ability across the learning outcomes that you were asked to study for. Okay? And here's a different, we'll turn this on its head and say, let's take a paper-based exam that hits 70% of the learning outcomes. Let's take someone who has worked on 70% of the syllabus. What might happen? Two things, two extremes. This guy could be extremely lucky, and he studied correlation, time series regression, and forecasting, and the examiner put it in. And he studied something else, and the examiner put it in. And he studied something else, and the examiner put it in. So everything he studied, again, remember these are independent of each other, so it is just luck that he managed to forecast, or he managed to guess what the examiner was putting in and got it right. Now you imagine that happening. You know, if that's going to happen to you, I think you're probably better off buying a lottery ticket than doing exams. But if that's, you know, you're going to come back and say, I'm the best management accountant there's ever been, I got 100%. You go back to your manager and say, right, I'm ready for my pay rise, I'm the 100% guy. Or you go to your management accounting lecturer and you say, I got 100%. Do you know what your management accounting lecturer says? This is because I taught you extremely well. We're a very vain and arrogant bunch of people, us accountancy lecturers. But then the other might happen. You did your 70%, the examiner chose 70%, all right? But there was 30 things that he chose that you hadn't studied, or 30 of the marks that you hadn't studied. So there's only 40 that you're familiar with out of the 70. Okay, you get a pass here. I'm assuming everyone does everything brilliantly in the exam if they know it. So you get 57%. These two different people have done the same amount of work, just in different areas. Look how different their marks are. Yeah? Go to your management accounting lecture and say, I've got 57. They'll say, oh, well done. Obviously weren't listening to me. 100% entirely down to me. All right? And as I say, that has just been the luck of the draw. Now, if we changed, so the top line, and said to the examiner, create an exam that fully reflects all the learning outcomes in the syllabus, both students would score 70%, which is fair. And this is what we're doing with objective testing. Yeah? We're testing all the learning outcomes. Objective testing, as we'll see, allows us to cover them all. You know objective test questions. You've probably seen a variety. We'll try and have a look at some. But they allow you to answer quickly. So instead of spending 45 minutes doing your question on time series, forecasting, regression, analysis, and correlation, you spend 5 minutes doing that, then you move on to another, then you move on to another. And by sample testing across the syllabus, we come out confident that you did the work. All right? Now, I've got another slide just with different numbers in it. Take the lazy one, right? Now, this is just to show, I don't think I want to employ this person. If I'm a CFO, I don't want to employ somebody who only does, well, less than half the work that's required. All right? So I don't want CIMA telling me that that person is good and employable. All right? Because they'll come in a few minutes late, they'll work until lunchtime, and they'll spend the afternoon on Facebook and doing Angry Birds or something like that. Okay? But he might pass the exam. Because again, his 45 things might come up in the examiner's selection, and he gets 64. He gets even more marks than the previous guy who done 70%. Now, of course, what we expect should happen is that he fails. But again, I have to put the numbers in just because they're there, and it shows you the possible range under paper-based examination of a bunch of learning outcomes. Again, if we put in everything into the test, there he'd be with 45%. So there's two things really that have come out in here. First of all, by having objective testing, it allows us to rigorously test across the entire syllabus. And we have that. The way we are creating the exams to go from 2015 is to make sure there's a really good balance across learning outcomes, and there's a balance across the types of questions. Okay, so we've got questions where there's a list of words in a box, and then there's a sentence to do with the topic being tested, and there's gaps, and you've just got to take the words and put them in there. All right? Or they may be in drop downs. So here's a sentence, and there should be a word in there, but there's a drop down, and you pick one of 4 words. Then you move further in the sentence, and you get another one of 4 words, and so on. All right? There are questions where it says, you know, what is 5 times 8? And there's just a box there that you've got to type 40 into. Okay? There's others that it may have a graph, vertical, horizontal axis, and it describes an organisation, and it says, so where does this description sit on this graph? And you can click anywhere in there, put a red cross, and there's an acceptable area behind the mechanics of the exam. All right, multiple answer, which of the following 4 statements are correct? There may be 1, 2, 3, or 4 correct statements given. Yeah, that's the toughest one. You don't here's 6 statements. Which of the following are correct? You don't know whether they're looking for 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. You might spot 2 that are correct and miss a 3rd one that is correct, but you get no marks unless you get an exact match on it. They're quite tough, and they're more common as you go through the management and up to strategic level, because that's really testing the evaluation and the analysis that you need at those levels. And we will have quite a lot of multiple choice questions, particularly at the operational unit management level. So here's 4 things, which one is correct? All right? And the mechanics of how we actually do the test. You know, so some of them you click on the box against the word. Some of them, I mentioned, you've got the drop down and you select a number or a word out of the drop down. The hotspot is click on the spot on a graph. The sentence completion, you've got, I say, a box, and you've got to click and drag the word or the number over into the field in the answer or the sentence where it should be. Okay, so you know we give you a little bit of variety in there, which I just hope it's going to be stimulating a little bit of well, it just keeps you better than having 60 things that you're looking for A, B, C, D, and you're going click, 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 click. Yeah, I forgot. I've kept on clicking. Yeah, so just 1 or 2 bits of variety just to try and keep left brain, right brain awake. Now, the practice exams, I'm going to try and get into this. Fingers crossed up for me, because we had a bit of fun and games with the Wi-Fi earlier. On CIMAglobal.com. See, if you follow it across, there's a students tab. Within the students, there's a 2015 syllabus, and then there's 2015 practice exams. All right? If this all goes horribly wrong, then